I'm Andrew Price.
And I'm Mike Bedard.
Welcome to Deep Cuts, the podcast where we walk you through the ins, the outs, and the nitty-gritty so that you can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at your next forced social function. Today's topic is...
Birds aren't real.
What is Birds Aren't Real? It's a conspiracy theory designed to poke fun at legitimate conspiracies, spearheaded by Peter McIndoe. Since 2017, it's gained a massive online following, with plenty of people getting in on the joke while others harass the founder. But even though it's clearly meant to be satirical performance art, what can Birds Aren't Real tell us about the actual conspiracies and how to dismantle them? Act 1. Birds of a feather, we should stick together. Conspiracies have always existed. The moon landing was fake. The Illuminati controls everything. Coca-Cola put out new Coke so that everyone would hate it and then they could switch the formula to include cheaper ingredients and no one would notice. But it's hard to deny that the advent of the internet, with virtually everyone having access to instant communication and information, has exacerbated this phenomenon. Something like QAnon can spread from online chatter to something discussed by major news networks. There are real-world consequences, like an increasing number of people refusing to get vaccines because it'll make them autistic or implant a 5G chip in them or something. Anytime something doesn't align with a person's pre-existing worldview, a new conspiracy is born. But what do we do about this? Maybe the answer lies in getting into the mind of a conspiracy theorist with something we all know couldn't possibly be true. Or is it? No, it's definitely not true. And that's why Birds Aren't Real has likely flourished over the past several years. You may have seen memes and billboards announcing how birds don't actually exist, but what exactly is it? And how did it start? To answer that, let's go back to January 2017, around the time of Donald Trump's first inauguration, and how a guy named Peter McIndoe seized the day like few do. Peter was visiting a friend in Memphis, Tennessee. A women's march was taking place, with those in attendance getting bombarded with insults by Trump supporters wearing MAGA hats. As Peter himself tells it,
"It was just kind of this chaos, and I'm not really sure why I did this. I think I was just maybe overwhelmed, or maybe it felt like there was so much madness happening, but I decided to pick up a sign and write my own thing on it. So I wrote on the sign the three most random words I could think of to pair together. And as you can guess, they were, birds aren't real. And then I started walking around chanting, birds aren't real. And people were asking me, what does that mean? And unbeknownst to me, I was being filmed the entire time."
All right, so we got our boy, Peter McIndoe. Do you think he looks like a cool guy? This is a picture of him, I guess the inaugural birth of Birds Aren't Real, where he's at this women's march and he quickly draws this sign. You know, it says Birds Aren't Real with underlines under it. And then it's got like one of those stereotypical like illustrations of a bird that you would see on like a city sign or something like that, like don't feed the birds or whatever. And then it's just that little V shape. And that's like the universal symbol for a bird. And it's got that with like a Ghostbusters line through it, which is very funny to me.
I like how you can tell that he hasn't thought this through at all. Because, I mean, so much of the lore will come later that we'll get into of where birds are like actually like surveillance drones. And this seems to imply that birds do not exist at all, or birds are not welcome here. That's kind of seems to be the message of that little image.
Yeah. And like you said, we'll get into this, but I think that that's like exactly how it played out. And it's also very funny. Like I really like stuff like that when you sort of like retroactively build complexity or lore into things, because it's very obvious. I mean, the words birds aren't real. It just blatantly implies that birds don't exist. And it's meant to be just kind of like just a completely nonsensical, absurdist thing to say. There's clearly no intent of there being meaning behind it. And then the funny part of this is the years of like retroactively trying to build like a coherent theory about it. The statement just does not make sense. And so the way that they come up with it ends up becoming this crazy science fiction theory that's like actually kind of cool. I love stuff like that where you take something stupid and then just like make it retroactively really complex and cool. Peter McIndoe, what do you think about this guy? You think he looks like he's the progenitor of one of the most viral conspiracy theories of our time?
Peter McIndoe looks like the guy on your college improv team who like gets way too into it and kind of makes it miserable for everyone else.
Oh, 100%. Peter McIndoe looks like the guy in your friend group who only eats cheese pizza and chicken nuggets.
In the image, he's wearing like this tan hat and like glasses. I don't think he normally wears glasses. He doesn't in some of the other interview clips we'll watch. Do you think he had that, or do you think he went out and got it to like complete the conspiracy? Do you think he got that to complete the conspiracy?
Oh, I think he did. Yeah, it looks. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe he just does, but to me, it looks like what he's wearing is like a costume. Like he threw on some glasses and then like a hat. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but it does not look like that hat is something he naturally wears. It doesn't look like it's like conforming to his head in a way that implies that he's been wearing it all day or whatever. It looks like he just threw this shit on to look like a crazy conspiracy nut guy.
It looks like a hat your Midwestern dad would wear that like doesn't quite fit, but it was like $3 at the gas station, so he just got it one day.
100%, yeah.
It just threw it on. Who would be susceptible to like actual conspiracy theories?
Yeah. So basically, you wrote this episode. So we'll just get that out of the way. This is a story that I've wanted to do an episode on for a while, and then we were like, hey, Mike, you want to write an episode about birds aren't real? So you've done a lot of the legwork and research on this. But that aside, when did you remember first hearing about birds aren't real? And like, other than when you went in to write the episode and actually did the research, like what was your impression of this and like what was your like knowledge of it before you like wrote it?
I think I became aware of it when it first became a thing, like probably 2017 or 2018. And it was just like a meme people would like post on Reddit of like how birds are fake, birds are like surveillance drones. You just see people post memes. I think there's like an actual subreddit of birds aren't real. One of the pieces of lore in this conspiracy is that birds sit on telephone wires to recharge, and so people will just like take pictures of birds on telephone wires and like post them to the subreddit, be like, they're recharging, get them now. And then the only other piece like of connection I had to this before writing this episode was, I think it was probably 2018, where a girl I was dating at the time got me a birds aren't real sweatshirt.
Wait a minute. The call is coming from within the house.
You thought you came up with this episode idea, but I incepted it into you, like.
And you're just gonna you're gonna hard left turn and just start like preaching about how birds aren't real.
The government's after us. They killed all the birds in 1967 or whatever it ends up being. But it was a cool sweatshirt. It was like a bird diagram where like half of it was just an actual bird, and then the other half was all the mechanical components supposedly inside birds, like labeled like the eyes are the video cameras, obviously, and then the audio recording device is somewhere. And it was just, if you didn't know what birds aren't real, it just looked like this kind of cool thing. But I don't know if I would walk around with a sweatshirt that says birds aren't real. I don't want that kind of attention or people being like, what the hell is this guy wearing?
Yeah, there's like multiple things to unpack there. First of all, it's obviously a satire, so, there's no mystery there. But it's funny because for anybody who would even remotely have believed that this was like a legitimate conspiracy theory, whether they believed in favor of it or they were the type of person, as we'll get to a little later in the episode, that are, they thought that it was a real conspiracy theory movement and they were like, these people are fucking idiots. It's like one of the most intentionally easy to disprove conspiracy theories ever, because like most conspiracy theories are basically designed to be like a negative that you can't prove. Like you can never really prove that it's not true, because even though like everything about the logistics of it suggests that it's not true, there's no evidence of it being true. You technically can't prove that there's not like a secret government deep state person in the like helping Trump and like posting. You technically can't prove that that's not true. But like with birds aren't real, you could just like go out and catch a bird and like fucking kill it or something like that and rip it open and be like, oh, whoops. I got bird guts all over me now.
I'm kind of surprised that wasn't some kind of controversy with this where like someone, because there had to have been someone.
Oh yeah.
Believed it was real and then like went out and like got a pigeon or like a crow and just like broke its neck. And it's just like, oh, look at how detailed this government drone is. And people are out here killing birds because of this Reddit meme.
I guess this is why I can't really do things like this, because that would be like one of my first thoughts. I would start to think about like what are the possible ramifications of doing it. And I would think like, oh, what if like this actually becomes like a real thing? And then whether they're actual crazy people who really think this is real, or they're just like some sociopath who's committing way too hard to the bit. Somebody goes out and just starts killing birds in the name of this thing. That's like where my mind would go. And I just wouldn't be able to like do it because I would just be too worried that I would be responsible for like birds being murdered.
It's a testament to the internet that didn't happen as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. And you know, that would be like a big story too. So I don't think it did happen. So that, yeah, it is crazy that nobody ever killed a bird. But I guess that's just a testament to the fact that like everybody who was really invested in this was pretty much in on the joke. Like there didn't seem to be any like accidental true believers, which is the thing you would be worried about, is that this would like metastasize into a real conspiracy theory that would like grow beyond what its original purpose was. Because, you know, as was talked about in the QAnon episode to a different degree, QAnon also kind of started out as a joke and then it became a real thing. That's a testament to the fact that like Birds Aren't Real never got quite popular enough. It was just popular enough to where like everybody who was into it understood that it wasn't a real thing. And it never quite made it over the horizon to being like a thing so big that there would be like thousands of people who were just like too removed from the joke and too stupid to realize that it's a joke. And then they would actually really believe in it. I don't think it ever quite reached those heights.
There's a darker timeline where that did happen, though.
Yeah, and now this is like a religion. Yeah, I mean, but that's basically what QAnon was. We sit there and like laugh about that, like, oh, wouldn't it be fucking crazy if birds aren't real, like in a different dimension became, but like, that's just literally what QAnon was. It just was a joke, stupid thing that makes no sense and is blatantly absurd. And it's became a real thing that people genuinely believe in.
And I mean, like, Birds Aren't Real, as we've discussed, is like inherently absurd. But like, if he had chosen, I don't know, anything else, any other 3 words he could fit on the little, I don't know, 16 by 12 piece of paper he has there, I mean, could this have gone bigger or could this have taken a darker turn?
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know unless we finally are able to punch through the dimensional membrane to the other side.
I'm trying.
Yeah, every day. I see you. My exposure to it more or less was pretty similar. Like, I never was aware that it was like a sort of centralized, controlled thing. Like, I didn't know that a guy started it and then was like basically like the person who was pushing it to be continually discussed and turned into a thing. My assumption, or like looking at what I saw and just making assumptions, was that it was like a meme that just came from somewhere and then it just kind of replicated like on its own on the internet. So I never know that there was like a person who created it and like literally had a company that was dedicated to like making it a thing until like maybe like a year or so ago, or maybe a little longer than that. But Taylor Loren, that journalist that works for the Washington Post, and she used to do, I think she used to work for the New York Times, and she tends to like write about a lot of like Gen Z stuff and conspiracy theories. And she, I think, pseudo satirically covered this and created this like almost like professional wrestling kayfabe style rivalry with Peter McIndoe. And then I started seeing videos of them like making these obvious like pro wrestling promo videos where they were like talking shit about each other. And I was like, oh, this is just, there's like a guy who's like the head of this. I didn't know that. And it's obviously a joke. But yeah, I wouldn't want to wear the shirt either. It's a funny thing, but at least for my taste, honestly, I don't really like memes. I'm not trying to say this in like a hipster way or whatever, but the moment that like a single joke like catches on to where like a bunch of people are just repeating it over and over again, it loses any entertainment for me.
And I guess it is because a lot of memes do, like, they originate accidentally, like you were saying, where like Disaster Girl was like, her dad like took a picture of the little girl in front of the burning building and she's like looking at the camera like maybe she set the house on fire, and then he just like uploaded, and then people like went to town on it and just like made whatever memes they wanted of like someone maybe not causing some kind of disaster, but they never actually profited off it. So I guess it's like good for McIndoe for like realizing, like, I need to start making money.
Yeah, he got to own the meme rather than like 99% of memes where it's just somebody made it and then they just put it out there, never expecting that it would be a thing. And then it becomes sometimes decades in the future, this popular meme. And they're just like, fuck, I'm like technically famous, but I've gotten $0. Peter became a viral hit. A week after the protests, he started getting sent pictures of people spray painting Birds Aren't Real onto walls and students writing it on chalkboards. While Peter states how he just came up with the idea on the fly, it's possible it may have come from an Oh Hello sketch from 2016 featuring John Mulaney and Nick Kroll.
We know Ozzy good.
You know, he knows some real fucked up 9/11 websites.
Really?
I just emailed him to you.
Oh.
Ozzy's one of the great skeptics.
Yeah, did you know birds aren't real?
No, I had no idea.
You're drinking the Kool-Aid.
So, like, he blatantly got it from that. There's no way.
That sketch was uploaded March of 2016. He makes the sign January 2017. Like, there's no way he didn't see that. And he obviously likes, I didn't get a chance to say this before, but he looks like his favorite comedian is John Mulaney.
Oh, yeah. He's into Oh Hello. He definitely watched that. He definitely watched the Nick Kroll show where I think the Oh Hello characters came from. Is that where they originated?
I think so. That might have been from the Nick Kroll show. I'm not sure where it...
Yeah, I think the Oh Hello characters came from the Nick Kroll show. Yeah, they had like the Too Much Tuna sketch and stuff. But yeah, 100% he just like subconsciously, through osmosis, just took that.
I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's like technically plagiarism. I don't know. It's like a line, a throwaway line from a sketch.
I mean, yeah, it's not plagiarism. Like, number one, you can't copyright like a specific idea. So like just a line from a sketch that isn't really like the main point of the sketch. There's no way you could copyright that or claim ownership over it anyway. But it softens like the impressiveness of what he did. The thing about it, at least for me, the thing about it that's like so funny about Birds Aren't Real is just that statement in and of itself. It's so ridiculous. And it's such a simple 3 words that just implies so much insanity that it's just really funny. And so for somebody to come up with that idea and then like to commit to it for years is hilarious. But the fact that he didn't actually come up with it and he just like Robin Williams some sketch that he saw makes it a little less.
Well, and there's that statement we read earlier where he talks about like seeing the Trump supporters and like the anti-Trump supporters getting at it. And he's like, yeah, I just got like a piece of paper and I just, these 3 words just came to my mind. Birds aren't real. And it's like, you probably saw that. But like when you're telling the story, like that's not as impressive to be like, oh yeah, I saw this sketch like a year ago and I thought that one line was pretty funny. And so I just wrote it on a billboard and like ran with it. Like, I guess it's like anyone, like if you're at like a party or something and you like quote a movie or something, or like, an episode of The Simpsons, or like, I think you should leave and everyone laughs, but no one else knows what you're referencing. You're just like, yeah, I came up with that.
When I was in high school, I was in PE one time and I was walking back from whatever we were doing, playing baseball or something. And there was a guy behind me. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't hate this guy so much. If it was somebody that I didn't hate, I probably wouldn't have done this. But there was this guy behind me that he annoyed me and I just really disliked him. And he was talking to a girl and he was telling her jokes that he came up with and she was laughing, but the jokes were not jokes he came up with. They were George Carlin jokes. And I turned around and I was like, that's George Carlin. And he was like, I must have forgot, or he said like something awkward, but I like completely destroyed his game that he was running. It was very satisfying to me. Still think about it to this day. One of the best moments of my life.
You ruined that guy's riz.
Yeah. I think he died shortly after that.
Oh, God. That's all he had going for him.
So Peter dropped out of University of Arkansas and moved to Memphis full-time to make Birds Aren't Real something. It was an appropriate avenue for Peter to take. He grew up in a hyper-conservative Arkansas community, and he was homeschooled in part due to his parents' conspiratorial belief that the Common Core school system brainwashed children. It's so funny because I'm sure I've told you this at some point throughout the years, but I was homeschooled.
You've mentioned it a few times.
But it's really funny to me because I was not homeschooled because my parents were like crazy religious nut jobs that thought that like public school was like a secular devil's like brainwashing tool. They were just lazy and didn't want to have to drive me to school. The thing my mom tells me is that she said that school wasn't challenging enough for me. I don't know if that's just her blowing smoke up my ass or whatever, but I ultimately think that it was because they were lazy. And so like everybody always talks about homeschool, and everybody I ever meet that is homeschooled, it's because their parents were super religious and they gave them this like really religious sanitized curriculum. Because a lot of this homeschool materials, it's all from like Christian companies and it's all like 4 plus 4 equals 8 because God died for our sins or whatever. And some of my materials were that because it's hard to not, like most homeschool
There's
materials.
just like the homeschool education curriculum section. And
it's most of it is faith-based, but that stuff was never reinforced or actually taught to me. So I had like a completely secular homeschool experience.
But since you were homeschooled for this other reason, I've heard this from like other people. Like, did you like hang out or were there events with other homeschooled kids? And then did those kids have like the conspiratorial parents? And so you got like secondhand the reason why so many other kids are homeschooled?
Well, there definitely are those events. And I know that like, well, I don't know how it is today, but I know that there was like in the 70s, there was a big homeschool boom and it became very popular. And there was this huge movement of homeschool parents that thought that public school was evil. And some of them were religious. Some of them, it was more of like a civil liberty thing where they just didn't want like children to be turned into like mindless drones or whatever. There was these two like schools of homeschool thought of like why kids should be homeschooled. And it got really popular in the 70s and its popularity waned throughout the 80s and 90s to the point where by the 2000s, it wasn't really a thing anymore. I'm sure it's probably come back at this point because of COVID and
I feel like if the trad wives have their way,
yeah, and
it's going to come back.
Increased like religious sentiment, but it waned in the 90s. And so whenever I was doing it, it wasn't really popular. It was once again, I think my parents just didn't like having to drive me to school every day. But there definitely were events like that and communities built around homeschools kids. So like there were parents that were friends with each other and they had homeschool kids and they would get together and they would be friends. I wasn't involved in any of that. I didn't do any of that shit. Whenever I was a kid, I just didn't have friends. There was no more. It was the end. I was homeschooled and I didn't know anybody.
Your parents were like, you're too smart for regular school. Fuck the like regular homeschooled people. Those guys are nuts. Like you're just gonna be in here. We're gonna bubble boy you.
You're just gonna be a lone wolf. You're gonna be a Sigma before Sigmas were a thing. There was like a neighbor kid who would come over to my house who I think like I knew from before I was taken out of school and homeschooled. And he would come over and we'd play N64. But other than that, I didn't really have friends until I was in high school.
It's really sad.
Now Peter was forming his own conspiracy, albeit one very tongue-in-cheek. He sold merchandise and bought billboards to plaster birds aren't real in cities like Los Angeles and Birmingham. Any money gained from selling merch allowed Peter to dedicate himself full-time to spreading the word. That included buying a van with, quote, birds aren't real emblazoned on the side so that he could travel around the country, usually wearing a cowboy hat. At first, he was openly in on the joke, posting to Facebook.
I made a satirical movement a few months ago, and people on Instagram seem to like it a lot. Now there's a Facebook, so the moms of the current bird truthers can be in on it too.
However, he quickly switched gears, realizing he could get more recognition if he leaned into the idea of playing a character who genuinely thought birds weren't real. He later discredited the Facebook post and said it was written by a staffer who was later fired. So, I love stuff like this. This is like the reason why I wanted to do this episode. This is the reason why I forced you to spend a week like researching this or whatever. I love stuff like this. Number one, I love as you see Peter go through, you see him like discovering what the thing is and like actively shaping it in real time as it's starting to form. Because he does the sign thing. And once again, he basically just like stole a joke from a sketch and then was like, oh, that'll be a funny thing. It was the equivalent of like when we were in high school and people would just go around like shouting Dave Chappelle quotes or Chappelle show quotes. Like he would just go to school and people would be like, okay, like across the quad or whatever. If you don't live in California, our schools are not inside, they're outside. So we have a thing called a quad. And it's like a open air outside. And then on the outer perimeters of the quad are all the buildings where you go into your classes. I recently learned that that's not how it is in most other places.
I just learned that too. I feel like we saw the same thing.
Yeah, we probably did. Yeah.
Like someone made a post of like, I think it was on Twitter of like, did you know like in California, they just have like open air high schools? And I'm like, yeah, it was like, cool.
Yeah. I grew up in New Mexico, but I, as I just explained, never really went to school. And I went to high school in California. So I never knew that was a thing. I just assumed that all high schools were like that. I always thought that like the inside high schools that you'd see in movies, that was like fake or like that was like how they used to be back in the 80s or something. And then they changed it. But apparently that's just how schools are. And just specifically in California, they were like, our fucking weather is always good. We don't need the inside, bitches.
where it rains 200 days a year. And I feel like I wasn't aware of that as well, because if you were like watching a TV show and that was set in another state and there were characters in high school, they've still filmed at a high school in Los Angeles, probably, that was open air. And then it just looked like the high school I went to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, and so, yeah, he did this thing and he was like, oh, that's funny. People think I'm cool if I do some weird little thing like that. And then it's easy to look back on it now and be like, oh yeah, this became a thing, of course. But like to him, when he started seeing people taking pictures of themselves, like graffitiing or whatever, he was probably like, what the fuck? Like, this is like a thing? Like, people like are buying into this or like thinking this is cool and like turning it into a meme. When he made this Facebook post being like, I created this fake thing, he was probably just like mind blown. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And he was just like bragging to his friends or whatever.
Well, it feels like the meme owners who like got screwed out of making any money off their memes because they didn't like take off on the internet until decades later. So he saw it starting to take off, starting to become memeified. And I think it's worth reiterating, dropped out of college to just like keep the meme going and like try to turn a profit off of it.
Yeah, which is like crazy. Like that level of like commitment and confidence or just like extreme risk taking that he was like, I like made a sign and somebody took a picture of it and then like people on the internet are kind of into it. I'm dropping out of school and moving. That's nuts.
I'm going to sell hats.
Yeah, that he had that level of confidence in it. But also, maybe he's just a business genius because he makes this Facebook post and he's like, oh, it's a joke or whatever. And then shortly afterward, you see the moment when the wheels start spinning in his head and he's like, wait a fucking minute. No, this isn't a joke. This is a real thing. And I'm this real character. I'm a guy that believes this. That's what it is. That's the narrative. And then, to come up with this little like funny, reverse engineered kayfabe thing of like, oh, that was like a rogue intern that like posted that without permission or whatever. Like you see the pilot light flip on in his mind and he just realizes like, oh, I just have to like commit to this, pretend like it's a real thing. And I have like a merch empire at the very least off of this. The level of business savvy that it must have taken to realize that so early, capture ownership of the meme before it got too big for him to be able to take ownership of it, and like literally like dropping out of school and changing his entire life to like focus on it is pretty impressive. And also just insane.
I feel like the thing is like, Mom, Dad, I'm dropping out of college to like become an actor or like get my band going. I don't know how I could approach my parents and be like, Mom, Dad, I made one really funny joke. That wasn't even really mine. But like, it's kind of taking off on the internet. So like, I'm dropping out of school to like put up billboards, continuing the same joke and sell t-shirts and hats and just have them look at me and be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean, it's like several degrees below something like becoming like a rock star or whatever, which they would already just say, what the fuck are you talking about to that?
At least there's some baseline. Yeah. I understand what that is and what you play gigs around town but like, what is this even? What even is this?
You're going to be a rock star? It sounds like a joke. It sounds like a stereotype from like a movie or a sketch or something like that, where somebody is like, some character is like, oh, I went viral for a meme I posted. I'm dropping out of school and becoming an influencer. And then it like gloriously fails because like that's not enough to become a real famous influencer. But for him, he did it. He fucking pulled it off.
Yeah.
Baby.
It's crazy.
But committing to the bit to this degree requires some backstory. The full story behind the Birds Aren't Real movement is that the United States federal government exterminated every single bird between 1959 and 1971. They were then replaced by drones that look like birds so that the government could spy on citizens. New wrinkles get added every so often, and just like real conspiracies, they aren't always consistent depending on who you ask. Some of the most noteworthy additions to the lore include how birds sit on power lines to recharge themselves, birds poop on cars to track them, and that John F. Kennedy was assassinated due to his reluctance to follow through on killing all birds. Specifically, the CIA used a hummingbird drone, a special type of bird drone that's designed for violence rather than surveillance, to assassinate Kennedy and then pin the blame on Lee Harvey Oswald. One of the biggest points Birds Aren't Real was prone to make was asking, how come you never see baby pigeons? Well, it's because they're sent out from the factory as fully fledged adult pigeons. Demonstrations would pop up around the country filled with predominantly Gen Zers in on the joke. Major cities even got their own chapters so that demonstrations could occur even if Peter himself couldn't attend. The whole thing could very well be chalked up to like a series of good luck or dumb luck. And maybe I'm just ascribing too much. But I really feel like Peter, he seems to have some kind of really good business sense. And he had just a really strong vision for how to build this thing out. I mean, once again, maybe I'm just finding patterns where they aren't. But you look back at this, and it's like every step of this was just perfectly crafted to go more viral, to become more and more of a meme, to get more and more people interested, all the way down to just like the details of the lore. Because the thing about these conspiracy theories is like they have to be like both like really nebulous, but also super specific. So the idea of like crafting this lore that's like really specific and has all these details where you're like, what the fuck is the point of this stuff? Like, why does it have all these like convoluted details? But like, that's what the conspiracy people love. They love the convoluted details. That's the whole reason why any conspiracy theory becomes popular, is because it has all these details and you feel like you're the fucking Charlie from It's Always Sunny with like the corkboard. Like that's what they want to feel like. So it was another stroke of genius to really early on be like, okay, this is a conspiracy theory movement. I'm a character who genuinely believes in this, and I'm like an Alex Jones type guy. And here's all these like really specific pieces of lore that tie into like history, all the tropes that conspiracy theories tend to. We're going to talk about JFK and his assassination. It hits all the greatest hits, and it's like really specific with all of them. And he did this all really early in it, in a way that, like, just to go back to the point, most people would not have done. And so most people would not have been able to like hold on to the ownership of their meme in this way.
There really seems, and again, I don't know how much he did, if he brought on other people, but he really studied conspiracies and tried to figure out what pieces he needed to put in there to make it as close to a real conspiracy as possible with the JFK stuff. Like, there's an entire book, I think it came out a few years after this, where they kind of like nailed down like the specifics a little more, and it goes into like every single bird, what it does. So there's like the eagle drones, there's like the hummingbird drones, like they each do something, and it's like kind of fun. I listened to like a little bit of it, and it's like, it's pretty fun. And the demonstrations do seem fun, like the central premise of birds aren't real, because like they get together in all these cities, they have these like fake protests, people have signs, and then if you watch some of the videos, if like a bird flies by, everyone boos it. Everyone's just like having a good time, like protesting nothing, basically.
Yeah, which is a thing I wanted to talk about, is this idea. We talk about this on the show a lot. For many episodes, we've discussed this concept that conspiracy theories used to be like fun, because for the most part, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that have always had elements of like anti-Semitic tropes and some like kind of nasty political stuff. But a lot of conspiracy theories really were just kind of like apolitical in a way, and really did not come from a place of hatred for the most part. They were just like small pockets of people who were just kind of fucking crazy, and they just didn't like believing in the mainstream narrative of things. And so these little stories would crop up and people would really heavily buy into them, but they were fun. They were like, you know, it was like, oh, the fucking Chupacabra or Area 51, or there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll that, you know, in the JFK assassination. Just like fun conspiracy theories that you could just kind of believe in, either really or just kind of as a fun thing to do with other people. And it really didn't like morally pull you in any direction. And then as of recently, in the last 10 years, conspiracy theories have just gotten really not fun, because they're mostly about hatred. And it's because they've gotten so mainstreamed and big by the internet that now like a lot of people are into conspiracy theories. And, you know, the more people you involve in something, the more shitty it's going to get. And then it starts to become about like subjugating and othering people, and it just gets nasty. And then this is like a third new thing where it's like, let's take conspiracy theory classic, the fun old type of conspiracy theory, and we'll do it in a modern context to where it has the structures of a modern QAnon, but it's like, it's all just a big, like, collective flash mob in a way. It's like being in an improv class or doing D&D or whatever. It's just a thing that everybody gets together. It's the true spirit of what a lot of people treated conspiracy theories like before, where a lot of people didn't really believe in those things. It was just fun to kind of say you did and kind of be open to the possibility that there was aliens in Area 51 and stuff like that.
Peter McIndoe was obviously like going to college like around 2017, 2016. And I feel like flash mobs were maybe a few years before that, but just since we've established he's probably like an improv guy.
Yeah.
I'm sure he like fucking loves that shit and just like saw this as like an opportunity to do big flash mobs, to engage in improv. Like later we'll look at some like news station interview clips he does where like you can kind of tell when he's riffing. Like he has his standard lines, but the anchors will kind of push a little more and then he'll just like riff something. So it's an opportunity for him to like live his best life and just completely riff off.
It's a fun homage to like what conspiracy theories used to be, which I find very fascinating, to take what conspiracy theories were and turn them into like a group performance art that's almost like trying to be, oh fuck.
Oh, they're after us.
They're coming.
Oh god.
We've gotten too close to the truth.
A bird pooped on a van to like alert them.
Oh shit.
They're over here.
But yeah, so take the spirit of what conspiracy theories were and turn it into this modern, fun group experience that's almost like meant to be like an antidote to real conspiracy theories as they exist now. Everything's so mired and bogged down by the shittiness of the world, and conspiracy theories designed to like other people and take your political enemies and turn them into pedophiles and all these really nasty things. And this is like the postmodern movement that's meant to like counteract it, which is very fascinating. By the way, just in case you were wondering, the reason you've probably never seen a baby pigeon is because unlike a lot of birds that leave the nest after a few hours or maybe a week, pigeons spend much longer in their nests, up to 5 weeks. So by the time they leave and you'd probably see one, it already looks like a grown-ass pigeon. I feel like even bigger than the birds aren't real thing itself, I feel like this specific detail became bigger and much more popular. The whole like rhetorical question of like, you never see baby pigeons, or why don't you see baby pigeons? I don't know if you've ever done this, but I made a TikTok video that went viral. It was a video about how I hate the Mandela effect and how I think it's really stupid. And in the video, I said something like, you know, it's one of those things that you hear on the internet constantly, like, you know, why don't you ever see baby pigeons or whatever? And this video got a lot of views and thousands of comments of people being like, yeah, you never do see baby pigeons. And like, just like that idea specifically, I think really did catch on.
That feels like that was co-opted by like the reality is a simulation crowd to like explain something, which is just another bizarre conspiracy. I think I have posted on TikTok about the Mandela effect. I got an email from this production company that wanted me to watch and make a video about this documentary they had put out about the Mandela effect. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I start watching it, and I thought it was going to be like a fun conspiracy. Yeah, like a documentary.
Just like how this thing
how it started,
became
like
popular, how it became a meme, how it became like a viral thing that people talk about.
But no, this was playing the Mandela effect completely straight. Like, you know, why do people remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father"? I watched it for like 10 minutes, and I was like, this isn't fun. And I just turned it off, and I just never emailed that company back.
Yeah, that's so funny, too, because it's like, I feel like documentaries are supposed to be at least a little bit researched, and like questions are like interrogated and investigated before you just make the movie. Because like even that's just so simple. It's because in Tommy Boy, he says, "Luke, I am your father" when he's in the office. That all those things are all based on like somebody else quoted something, and then you remember that, and that's why you think it's that line.
And like, if you were to just say, "No, I am your father," which is what he says in the movie, you wouldn't know that's inherently Star Wars.
Yeah, he changed it to "Luke, I am your father," so
because you know that's
understand it better. Already, that movie just fucking sucks.
I fucking hated that movie, or the 10 minutes I saw of it. I did the opposite of what that company wanted me to do. Instead of making a TikTok about it, I came on a podcast and just like talked shit about it.
I feel like I probably would have just ignored it, but if I did respond to it, I would probably have watched the movie and then made a video about it, just talking about how fucking stupid it was and like debunking every single thing it says in the video, like line by line. As this character, Peter didn't even claim to be the founder of the movement. He was merely the next in a long line of individuals trying to get the word out, with frequent posts to social media with his so-called truth. And the movement even has its own list of demands. Firstly and obviously, it wants the government to suspend the use of all bird drones. They also want to begin the process of bird repopulation in the United States by bringing in birds from other countries. Another bit of lore entailed getting an actor to pretend to be a former CIA agent to talk about his role in killing every bird.
Well, Eugene, it was just a couple of weeks ago that we saw your name
Uncle
in that
Eugene.
article, and now we're sitting across from each other. So thank you so much for doing this.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're this far into the episode, and this is actually the first full motion video of him we've seen. Obviously, he looks way different than he did in that original video, or that original image. He looked like a 2000s kind of like basic bitch. And now he looks like he's wearing a hoodie. He's got like shaggy hair.
He's definitely leaning into the conspiracy guy aesthetic because he has like the scruffy hair, the hoodie. It looks like he's like on the run, like someone's after him. Like, he just like rolled out of bed and just like.
He's in Alex Jones mode.
I know we talked off camera some, but just for our viewers who don't know much about you, can you give us some on your background?
Well, I started off in the military for a few years in California.
Okay.
Then after I got out of the military, I was doing security for the CIA. I was in D.C. in 72. And then they moved me into domestic intelligence. And it's while I was there that, I saw some things that I really wish I hadn't seen.
Are you referring to bird drone surveillance?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us some more about that?
Oh yeah, like I said, I'd been with the CIA for a few years. And then one morning I got ordered to report to a military base. And I was briefed on something called Operation Water the Country. And when
for those who don't know what that is, can you explain what that is?
Oh sure, it's a code name we use for the process of removing all the living birds. They used poison gas dropped from airplanes.
Now, after the living birds were taken out of the picture, what was the next step?
Well, they were replaced with fake birds. They were electronic decoys. They could watch people without them knowing it.
What was your role in all of this? Like, how do you know this information?
I was in charge of destroying the evidence. It was believed at the time that it wouldn't be safe if the general public knew what was happening.
Okay. You just mentioned evidence. What kinds of evidence are you talking about?
Well, this went on for 10 years. There was thousands of documents, blueprints, film footage, photographs, and so on like that.
Did you keep anything?
No! Nothing. Well, there might have been one or two things.
The funny thing about that is, like, the whole thing feels a little too, like, rehearsed. Like, the guy, the CIA agent, his responses just seemed a little bit too scripted, a little bit too rehearsed. And Peter, he feels like he's playing too much of I'm like a truth teller type character. But it still doesn't really feel that inauthentic or far from, like, real videos like this. Because if you watch any of these like hard-hitting interview videos from like the Epoch Times or whatever, where they have somebody from the Epoch Times talking to some whistleblower who's telling you about how COVID was like manufactured or whatever, it doesn't even feel off or like inauthentic from that because those people are fucking lying. So they are actively engaging in a performance as well. They're acting, they're rehearsing shit that they made up. And the hosts or the people, the conspiracy theorists or whatever, they really do think of themselves in their minds as these like badass truth tellers. And so they are playing this character of like, I'm getting to the heart of this story or whatever. So like, even though that did feel fake, it still felt real. It still felt like a real conspiracy theory video.
It was, fake in just what is unfortunately happening now, just down to the guy had one or two pieces of evidence, but we don't see it. And also, I didn't catch this when I wrote the script, but like that first part of like the lore of like the government killed off all the birds from 1959 to 1971, and then this guy joins the CIA in 1972. Well, all the Byrds would have been dead by now, so this is like we're already getting like some kind of like secondhand source, which I guess is also like kind of in the vein of any, from the Epoch Times or whatever, trying to pass off as a legitimate conspiracy. Like, it doesn't even add up. Like, they're presenting this as their smoking gun, but if you just think about it, if you know kind of a few pieces of the lore, you're like, well, this doesn't make sense, or this guy isn't like the person you should be getting to have this groundbreaking revelation.
Yeah. The thing is, like, that's also kind of genius as well, because
definitely.
Conspiracy theories always have those little inconsistencies. And the funny thing about those is that they're almost like galvanizing points where it almost shouldn't be too watertight, because
you need to be able to flip when you like can. It's like you want like all your options in front of you, and then if this one falls apart, you still have this one over here.
Yeah. And also, like, whenever people try to point those things out, point out the inconsistencies or the contradictions or whatever, it like naturally makes people want to like dig in more. Like, once you're all in on this and you have somebody being like, well, that doesn't make sense because blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make you go like, oh shit. Oh yeah, you're right. It makes you go like, no, fuck you. You're trying to tempt me back to the other side. You're trying to brainwash me. They're like galvanizing rather than like what you would assume they would be, which is sort of a eureka moment where you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't fucking make any sense.
You're right. I've ruined my life. And then, but they never want to say that.
Videos like this would get published under the Birds Aren't Real YouTube page, getting millions of views and thousands of followers across Instagram. Soon enough, the movement began bleeding into real life. It didn't take long for Peter to get invited onto actual news programs who wanted to talk with him about the conspiracy. Take this 2019 appearance on WREG in Memphis.
The government started this.
How come it took so long to get billboards up and for any of us to hear about this?
That's an excellent question. So really before the internet age, before the internet era, it was very easy to censor ideas and opinions that aren't popular and that people don't agree with. Mm-hmm. Now that we have the internet, there are no more book burnings, there are no more censored television ads.
Well, there are attempts to do all of that, but you're right. It's like Arab Spring. It's very grassroots, ground
So where does
up.
this movement go from here?
I just gotta say, the thing that stands out to me more about this interview is this news anchor on this Memphis local news station. She's fucking woke as hell, baby.
Yeah, in Memphis. I mean,
yeah.
I have no idea how liberal Memphis is.
She's talking about the Arab Spring.
Woke as fuck, bro.
From here, we're looking to see change in legislation. We're looking to see a mass spread awareness.
Are lawmakers, though, really taking this seriously? Because a lot of people will have their doubts or have their questions about whether or not the movement is really serious or not.
Yeah, that's been a really hard part of this, honestly. Since the billboard's gone up, there's been a reaction of supporters and loyal bird truthers coming out, saluting, bowing. It's almost become like a sacred pilgrimage to see it. Others, though, seem to have some kind of laugh response, and it really pains me.
So on the website, there are T-shirts you can buy. There's products you can buy. There are going to be some skeptics who say, they're just trying to sell T-shirts. They're just trying to make money. Where do the funds that the movement makes from the sale of T-shirts go? Where does that go?
I would say every movement, go to any political website, they are all equally selling merchandise to spread and support.
Oh, okay. So the money is used to continue to buy the billboards, for instance.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Yep. It's to fund movement efforts, to fund activism and public awareness.
All right, Peter. We appreciate you being with us this morning.
Our conscious queen. We should get this lady to moderate every presidential debate moving forward forever.
Get her in the White House press room.
She would have been in that interview with Trump, and he'd be like, no, it's not. It's MS-13. And she'd be like, well, actually, see, the thing about that is I have this picture here, and as you can see, if you look closely, the MS-13 are clearly just letters that they put onto the image to show what these tattoos supposedly mean. The ink color is much darker than the rest of the photo, and they're not even aligned with the knuckles in any kind of like geometrical way. So, I think it's pretty obvious to see that these are not literally on his knuckles here. And then here's another photo that's taken of him at a different time where you can see that the numbers are clearly not there anymore. And Trump would be like, you're right.
Just Trump has his like Ratatouille moment where like he's just cornered and then like just flashbacks into his childhood of like him just being like a little boy and having this like, you know, not getting the love from his father and being like, is that what all this was? All this was for nothing.
She just takes him in, hugs him, and he just weeps into her shoulder. And
like, I don't know why this fantastic newswoman from WREG in Memphis asked the question I feel like anyone who is presented with like a conspiracy theory like doesn't ask, or at least not from what I've seen, of like, so where's the money going? Like, why, you know, Alex Jones, or I don't even know if he has a show anymore, but if he's saying all this stuff, and it's like, well, he's selling also like supplements. A lot of these places like sell supplements and vitamins. Like, where is that money going? Like, and it's just like, well, we were just enriching ourselves. I feel like Peter is legitimately just putting the money back into buying billboards and like just trying to push this thing further and make his own videos.
He's selling merch to put money into the business for, you know, I guess originally the aims of just a really hard commitment to a joke, and then later on maybe something a little bigger, as we'll talk about. At first glance, it might seem like everyone knew immediately that there's no way this movement could be real. News anchors, anyone sharing the memes online, they all knew this was satirizing things like QAnon, combating something ridiculous with something even more ridiculous. The purpose of the satire seems abundantly clear. But as the protests continued growing larger in size, Peter discovered truths about how hostile people can be to conspiracy theorists, and his work would soon change from merely poking fun at conspiracies to actively trying to find ways to dismantle them. Well, Mike, how you feeling about our journey through the mind of Peter McIndoe so far?
I'm enjoying it. Peter sounds like an upstanding young man. Like, there's a real commitment to the bit, which I appreciate. Listeners might not know this, but like, we were roommates for a long time, and I feel like we just did bits. Every so often, like, a woman will post a TikTok, like, what do men talk about? And it's just, we just do
pure bits.
We just do bits. Like, we take on these characters, and we just like goof around.
Yeah.
But we would goof around for like, I mean, I feel like we had some bits go on like a long time.
Yeah,
but
yeah. When you see us out in the world, women or people we work with or whatever, you know, we're normal people. We're just talking about things. But within the hollowed halls of that apartment building, we're in one never-ending bit.
And the bit can
And you
stop.
wouldn't even know what we were talking about if you walked into the middle of it.
The bit can stop, and you'll go back to like talking about your life or whatever, and then someone will just say something. There'll be an inside joke. It doesn't even mean anything to anyone outside of the bit. But then the bit is back on.
But yeah, maybe you could be onto something there, though. Maybe that's why we love these stories so much. Like, we do a lot of stories. Dave and I do a lot of stories like this on the show. And one of the most recurring themes of the show is like people committing to something to like an obsessive degree, where they go to the ends of the earth to like sell some kind of joke or like a performance art piece or some kind of like long con or whatever. Like that's a very specific fascination point for the show. And maybe that is the reason why. Maybe it's the reason why we love that so much is because that's just at our heart. All of us are just like, we're just in it for the bit. It's all about the bits.
Is kayfabe really just like committing to a bit? And there can be various degrees. There can be the birds aren't real bit. There can be like the breatharian bit, where like someone just like took the idea that you can eat air just too far until it doesn't even make sense, and they're just like trying to scam people, but they're mostly trying to scam rich people. And then like the sinister bits, where someone just forms like a whole religion that like takes advantage of people.
Yeah, and I think that like the overarching theme of the show is that they are all just bits. And there's like this universal theory of everything that like all these things, conspiracy theory movements, cults, political movements, dictators, performance art, it's all just like people crafting personas and creating bits and then committing to them down some rabbit hole. Whatever that ends up being, whether it's just a funny thing like this, or whether it's like Andrew WK and him just wanting everyone to believe that he's like a clone or whatever, or if it's something like QAnon that wants to like overthrow the government, basically. It's all kind of just the same thing.
We're all just doing bits. At the end of the day, when you think about,
we're all just doing bits.
Like when you're at your house, That's probably your purest self. But when you go to work, you have a certain role, and that's basically you doing a bit, whatever your job entails. You go to hang out with your friends, you do bits with them. It's all just bits.
Yeah, it's all bits. I'm going to tell one more bit. So this was a long time ago. We used to have a sketch comedy group called Pregnantville, and we did videos and we did a lot of live performances. We did like a yearly sketch show, and you were in it. Another friend of the show, Brandon, was in the group, and there was a couple other guys. And one of the guys I worked with, and his name was Sean. And so I worked with him at Borders Books, and he worked in the back. He was a stalker, and I was a bookseller out in the front. And I would frequently just go into the back and just hang out with him and get away with like not working as much as possible by just like pretending like I was back there doing something important, and we would just stand around talking about stuff or whatever. So one day I come to work and he's like delirious. He's like, he didn't sleep for some reason. He has no sleep. He's like slept for like an hour, and he's just like delirious from no sleep. And he's like telling me this, and he's like seems kind of out of it. So I decide that I'm going to start a bit because we have sketch comedy practice later after work. We're going to the theater and we're going to get together and practice the show that we're running. So I go back there and I'm looking for a book. I'm looking for Breaking Dawn, the Twilight book that was out at the time, had just come out. And I came back there because somebody needed a copy of it and we were just out of them up front. And so I walk back there and I say, hey, do you have any more copies of Breaking Dawn? Oh, it's just a fly or something like that. And for the listener, I like said it and then I like reacted like something landed on my shoulder and then I swatted it away. And then I swiped at it and then I went, oh, it's just a fly or something. So I did that. And then I waited an hour and I went back into the back and I said, hey, Sean, do we have any more copies of Breaking Dawn? Oh, it's just a fly or something. And he like, I thought that he would just obviously know I was fucking with him because like that's just so obviously somebody fucking with you. Like there's no way. But he was like, he was so tired that he was just like, he just gave me this look like of deja vu, like he vaguely recognized something, but he wasn't quite sure what it was and he couldn't quite put his finger on it. And he was just like, what are you doing? And I was just like, what? And then I waited 3 hours. I went back in the back room and I was like, it'll be too obvious if I just say the same book. So I asked where a different book was. I don't remember what the second book was. I remember the Breaking Dawn because it had just come out and it was like a huge phenomenon. But I don't remember what the second book was. But I was like, hey, do we have any of this back here? Oh, this must have been a fly or something like that. I think I genuinely started to drive him insane. And so we leave work. And I can't remember if I texted you or if I got to the theater first and I just got to you guys. But I was like, okay, whenever we get to the theater or when Sean gets to the theater, you got to go up to him and you got to ask him a question. And then immediately after you ask him the question, react like something landed on your shoulder and then swat at it and then say, oh, I guess it was just a fly or something like that. And so one by one, each of you in different times did it to him throughout the night. And nobody ever acknowledged. And we just, every time he would just be like, what the fuck? What is going on? And you'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't know. I did this long bit to him from like 8 a.m. to like midnight. And, yeah, we never acknowledged it. We never told him it was a joke. I mean, so to this day, he's probably insane.
I don't know if this is breaking the reality of the show, but Berries and Mush was a bit.
It's funny that you bring that up because the other day that song came on the radio and I didn't even know that Jaden knew this, but I guess apparently we told her or I told her or something like that because she started laughing. And I was like, oh, the Berries and Mush thing? And she's like, yeah. But that song came on. But yeah.
There was one year since we lived together and we were both going to see our families for Thanksgiving in the same town. We were like carpooling up together and we're like listening to the radio. It was like some alternative rock station. And we're just like singing along, but like inserting Thanksgiving things periodically.
Yeah. We were turning every song into a Thanksgiving song.
Parody. And then that one 21 Pilots song came on that goes like, I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. And then I go, when like the second time the chorus comes in, I was like, I've been eating too much. Eating berries and mush.
Yeah. And there was like, the funny part about it was that you could obviously tell that you just like couldn't think of a good thing. And so you just said like berries and mush. And we both laughed for like 15 minutes.
We kept listening to the radio, and just every song became Berries and Mush.
Yeah,
even if it did not work like structurally in the song, we just put Berries and Mush in there.
And we created lore that Berries and Mush was this like classical, famous Thanksgiving dinner meal. And then we ended up coming up with the idea of like there's also something called Jerry's, which is like a thing you sprinkle onto the berries and mush. And it became this whole bit, this whole lore that we came up with. And then like I wrote a song about it, and I would like go around the house playing the song all day. And then when we were doing the Hillsmer's holiday special, I just had an idea where I was like, what if Berries and Mush was like the like favorite holiday food of space demons? And then we did a whole episode about it. And I like asked her permission. I was like, can we use Berries and Mush for the show?
And I was like, yeah. But then we were also like, every Thanksgiving after that for like years, we would text each other. We would be at our respective families' houses, and we would just like, usually get like some cranberries and just like put them in like mashed potatoes or something and be like, happy berries and mush.
Yeah. Actually, this is funny because I didn't think about this. This is a way better example than my thing. But that's a perfect example because that's exactly an example of this like committing to the bit over time thing that we're talking about. Because on Thanksgiving of 2015, I think it was 2015, we came up with that bit. We came up with that joke happened. We turned it into a bit. We started building all this lore around it, that it was like this favorite holiday meal from a alternate dimension or whatever. And there was like Jerry's, and there was all these rules about it. And then I came up with songs about it that I would play around the house. And one of the songs was just like, honestly, I've forgotten the beginning of the song, and I can only remember the bridge of the song, but it was, you can never forget them Jerry's on your berries and mush. Don't you ever forget them Jerry's on your berries and mush. And if you ever forget them Jerry's, the mush will taste really ordinary. So I would go around playing that song all the time in the house back in like 2015, 2016, 2017 or whatever. And then cut to years later, we use berries and mush in the Napster episode. And when we put the Napster episode out, a bunch of the listeners did covers of songs from the Napster episode. So they covered a bunch of the songs from the musical, but somebody did a saxophone cover of the Berries and Mush song. I don't remember his name. God bless him. He's a listener of the show. He used to be in the Facebook group. I haven't seen him in a long time, but he used to be active in the Facebook group. But he did a saxophone cover of that song because it was in the episode. I did a version of that song in the episode. And so cut to 2020, where some random stranger is learning how to play the Berries and Mush song on his saxophone because of that bit that we came up with in like 2015.
Your bits, they can go to some dark places, or they can just kind of bring joy to people's lives.
Indeed. Well, aside from the glorious development of the bit, this is basically the part of the show where we kind of take a break and plug stuff, but also, in these times, I also just want to stop and just kind of catch everybody up and give a little bit of context. We have Mike on the show. Mike is obviously, as we've just been discussing, a longtime friend of mine, and he's also a writer for the show. He's written a lot of the great episodes of Deep Cuts, and he's coming onto the show basically as like a alternate guest host because, temporarily for this foreseeable future, Dave has to take a hiatus from the show because of some family matters that are going on for him. So we're basically going to continue the show, and we're going to have guest hosts every other week until basically we have some pre-recorded Dave episodes that we're running. So last week we had an episode with me and Dave. It was the Protherians episode. And this week we're going to have Mike on the show. And then next week we will have another Dave episode. And then we'll just alternate until we run out of pre-recorded episodes. And then if Dave isn't back already by that time, then we will move to a weekly guest format. So that's why Mike is here. He's filling in for Dave because Dave has to take a leave from the show for a little bit. He'll be back soon, hopefully within the next month or so. But until then, we've got Mike and maybe a couple other people on the mic. So that's why we're doing this. Mike, do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok at Cinema Singularity, where I post movie reviews, film analysis, and interviews with actors and screenwriters and directors, just kind of talking all things film. You can find me on Instagram at Mike Bedard. Nothing special about that one. That's just if you like me on the podcast and just see what I'm up to.
There is a video of Mike asking Chris Pratt to his face if he hates Mondays, and also a video of Mike asking Kyle MacLachlan to his face if he something about pie.
It was the interview was for Fallout.
Oh yeah, and you asked him if his character in the show loved coffee and pie.
The hard-hitting questions when Mike Bedard's on the mic, motherfucker. But I do think they like it because like Chris Pratt gets at you're sitting in a hotel room for like 12 hours. And people just kind of ask you, so what was it like to be Garfield? And it's just like, you just have me coming in there and be like Mondays?
Those are the questions we want to know. It seemed like it was pretty easy to do the voiceover. I don't care about the process. I just want to know if Chris Pratt likes Mondays or not. Other than that, you can follow us by going to Facebook and searching Deep Cuts Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Deep Cuts Pod. You can join our Facebook group, the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group, where we talk about the show. We make memes. We do other fun stuff. We have a cool little community there. You can also join our Discord server, bit.ly.com/deepcutsdiscord, where we talk about the show. We make memes. We play games. There's another cool little community of people who talk about the show there. You can go to our website, deepcutspod.com. You can get some merch like hats, t-shirts, baby onesies, so on and so forth, with cool Deep Cuts graphics on them by clicking on our shop. You can also follow us on TikTok at Mystery Treehouse. You can follow us on YouTube by searching Deep Cuts Podcast, and you can follow me on TikTok, where I make similar videos to Mike, more in the kind of like fun fact explainer type realm, by going to TikTok and searching for at Treehouse Detective. And now, back to the show. Act 2, Ruffling Some Feathers. By 2021, Birds Aren't Real protests were regular occurrences. One of the most notable occurred outside Twitter headquarters in San Francisco, where Peter McIndoe and anybody who wanted in on the fun gathered to demand the company change its bird logo, which they did do eventually, so good job? Let that sink in? Which is a reference to a joke that Elon Musk told that maybe people have forgotten by now, but still fresh in my mind. In fact, after Elon Musk purchased Twitter and rebranded it to X, eliminating the bird logo, one of his first posts was, "I knew birds weren't real."
That's when Birds Aren't Real died.
Yeah, I was literally going to say the exact same thing. If Birds Aren't Real was ever like cool and was ever like a genuinely funny thing that I would proudly wear like a shirt or a hat of, that's whenever I would be like, it's fucking over now. It's not fun anymore.
Well, that's the meme of like, there's like a person like wearing a pineapple on their head. And then the second panel is like a bunch of people wearing pineapples. And then there's like a pink guy and it says like brand, who has like the pineapple and then like all the brands. It's like once that happens, it's over. And it did kind of end shortly. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of it, but
yeah,
this is I want to say downfall, but because it didn't really have a downfall, but it changes very soon.
Like a scientist studying the cure for cancer's career, Elon killed it. Members of the movement also used their numbers for good in addition to lunacy. Shortly after Texas passed a new anti-abortion law, supporters of that law gathered to celebrate, complete with signs featuring graphic imagery shouting at anyone they could. Birds Aren't Real activists, known as the Bird Brigade, jumped on the opportunity and showed up for their protest to shout, "Birds aren't real." Their yelling overpowered the anti-abortion activists, who soon left. This is the point where like this crosses over. I mean, after the death of Birds Aren't Real, whenever Elon fucking tweeted about it, this is the point where it starts to cross over from like, okay, Peter McIndoe smartly, ingeniously, maybe some degree of dumb luckily, carved out a space for himself in the internet ecosystem. Mostly to sell merch and create a sort of persona for himself, carve out some influence, and just kind of do like a funny performance art experiment. For the most part, you look at it and you're like, yeah, it's just like a fun little bit, as we've been kind of hammering in for the last 20 minutes. And that's fun. And that's cool. Before Elon came around. And this is the part where it starts to shift into like, okay, I kind of see where this could really elevate beyond that and become something actually useful and good. Because I kind of set the breadcrumbs up for this a little bit earlier by talking about this idea of taking old school conspiracy theories, gamifying them, turning them into like a group experience and almost becoming like the postmodern antidote to real conspiracy theories. And this is where that starts to take hold, where it's like, you look at this and you start to see the potential of what something like this can be, because Birds Aren't Real inherently is just kind of like, it's intentionally absurdist conspiracy theory brain rot. It's like designed to be the most ridiculous and extreme version of real conspiracy theories that we know sort of have taken hold. And we also know that one of the tactics you can do for combating rhetorical subterfuge that you can wield when you're fighting against an ideological opponent is to sort of flood the narrative with nonsense so that it becomes hard for people to pick out the reality from the nonsense. And that's, kind of in a much darker degree, more or less what the current presidential administration is doing. They're just kind of flooding us with a lot of stuff so that we become overwhelmed, and it's hard for us to focus on what's really important because there's like 12 million different crazy things that are happening every day. And this is that. This is how you can wield that for good, though. You can be like, okay, there's this thing happening where these people are out here, they're harassing people, they're causing a disturbance in this place where these people are trying to do this thing, help women out, provide healthcare. There's all these shitbags who are out here, yelling at them, calling them murderers, all these things like that. So let's just go and let's drown them out with crazy nonsense until it's untenable for them to continue. And that's how you can really wield something like this for good. I look at this and I'm like, yeah, we need to do more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I obviously don't know like the intricacies of like how he pulls everything off, but just having the Birds Aren't Real movement, which started by accident and he kind of like fell his way into it. But then he sets it up. As we mentioned earlier, there are all these chapters across the country in all these cities. So, and it's all predominantly young people, probably left-leaning, who are very aware that like this is making fun of QAnon and more right-leaning conspiracies. And so like, oh, there's the, these anti-abortion protesters in Texas. I can just hit up the Texas chapter or whatever city this was in and like have them go. And like, it's not just like being an influencer, but like he has all of these, like everything's coordinated. He knows where his supporters are.
He's created a like-minded coalition that is a little bit flexible because they're not all built off of one real specific idea. It's not like he created like a mutual aid infrastructure for helping out homeless people or whatever, like very specific things. He just created a group of people that all kind of have a similar vibe and are just kind of naturally culled into like a group of like-minded individuals that kind of all believe in a similar thing. But they're malleable to be able to mobilize on a bunch of different things because they're not all dedicated to one specific thing. They're dedicated to like a joke, basically. So then you can just basically wield the popularity of that joke and the fact that all these people are really invested in the joke and be like, hey, there's this thing happening in this city. Go over there and, do our thing.
And do a joke. Yeah. Like turn it into a joke.
Yeah.
What they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Such protests were filled with signs and flyers featuring the group's patented slogans like, if it flies, it spies, and birdwatching goes both ways. Through all this, Peter was always acutely aware that this could spiral into something far more sinister, something he couldn't control. But through all the protests, Peter can only recall one instance when he ran into a legit conspiracy theorist who thought birds really weren't real.
There was one time at the CNN rally, actually. This guy walked up to me and starts talking about how he's a member of this, very elite family with this famous name. And he was saying, I love how a lot of the information you present is absurd. But, but it's true. But it's true. The way you present it is absurd, which is a smart way to get it out to people. But it is true. And later that day, I got an Instagram message from this guy. I said, oh my God, that's the guy from the rally. And I opened up his profile, and it was just years and years of thousands of posts of conspiracy theories.
However, there were still plenty of folks who thought the movement was real. They just had the opposite kind of reaction to seeing all these protests. Over the years, Peter estimates that hundreds, if not thousands of people approached him during these rallies to yell and scream at him about how, of course, birds were real. Peter recalled one incident in Branson, Missouri.
This guy walked up to me and started not just calling me crazy or stupid, but started saying, you're schizophrenic, you need help. If we're to a point where you're not even having empathy for someone that you think is schizophrenic, then we're at a really bad point.
During these interactions, something clicked with Peter. Obviously, he knew the whole thing was a joke. He knew birds weren't actually replaced with sophisticated drones with microphones and cameras to spy on Americans. While part of him found their responses funny, getting so worked up over something so stupid, There was part of him, the part that embodied the leader of a conspiracy movement for 4 years, that felt sad and emboldened. Part of him wanted to double down on a conspiracy theory he knew he made up on the spot while visiting friends. In December of 2021, it was time to take the movement to the next level. It was here the New York Times published a full expose of Peter McIndoe, fully breaking character and admitting that birds aren't real, was in fact all a joke. Following the reveal, Peter began going out and spreading a new message. It wasn't enough to just poke fun at how people will seemingly believe anything in the internet age. His goal now became spreading awareness of how he could possibly combat people who believe things that seem just as outlandish as every bird in America being a drone. This included giving a TED Talk in 2023 where he begins in character talking about his conspiracy before transitioning into introducing himself as the real Peter McIndoe and offering his perspective on why people are drawn to conspiracies.
I was really dedicated to playing this character as convincingly as I could, as method as possible. So I spent days sometimes in character, a lot of time out in public with the van there, just talking with strangers. It led to hundreds of interactions with strangers who thought that I was a real conspiracy theorist. I'd often be out there, cowboy hat on, handing out flyers that said things like if it flies, it spies. We had another flyer that said bird watching goes both ways. And during these times, as I'm handing out flyers and talking with people, there were hundreds, maybe thousands of instances over the years where strangers would approach me. You know, they'd see me in public, and I'd see them notice me. They'd walk up to me with complete disdain on their face. They thought that I was a real conspiracy theorist. And time again, they'd come up to me, look me right in the eyes, just as close as I am to you right here, and they would tell me how stupid I am. They'd tell me I was uneducated, that I was crazy, that I was the problem with this country. When this happened, I didn't feel the emotions of the character that I thought I would. My out-of-character self may interpret these interactions as a funny response to someone that fell for the comedy project, but instead I felt the emotions of the character. I felt emboldened, and I felt sad and angry, like they didn't even take the time to know me. They instantly condemned me, judged me, and othered me. I'd found myself on the opposite side of this equation that I'd grown up around, the normal and the fringe. And in those moments when those people were talking to me, they could not have been more ineffective at what I would assume they really want. Less conspiracy theorists in the world. These experiences, hundreds of them over the years, watching how people interact with those on the fringes of our society, gave me an entirely new perspective on our approach to conspiracy theorists, whether it's how we frame them in the conventional media, to how we deal with those in our own lives. If our goal is to live in a shared reality with our neighbors, what if our current approach isn't bringing us any closer to that? What if by talking to conspiracy theorists like they're ignorant and stupid, we're actually pushing them farther away from the truth that we want them to see? Because what happens when someone tells you that you're stupid, you're all wrong, you're the problem? You'll feel judged and dismissed, and most importantly, you'll feel othered, which may lead you to look for safety in those who are like-minded, to do what they have been doing for you. Affirm your selfhood, give you a sense of identity, belonging. These are some of the most basic human desires. We have to consider that conspiracy theorists are not just joining these groups for no reason. They're getting rewards out of these, things that we are all looking for. A sense of purpose, community. I grew up with the internet, and during my time with this project, especially out of character, people have talked to me about the misinformation age and this, terrifying problem of online echo chambers and conspiracy theorists. But I want to remind us that there are humans behind a lot of these screens. It's not just numbers. Everyone's unique experience influences their own narrative about the world, and there's no blueprint for how to deal with this yet. But I do not think that online echo chambers of conspiracy theorists are this inevitable symptom of life online. The internet is about 30 years old, and things are changing quickly, and I think it'll be very important that we develop new solutions for these new problems on a fundamental level? What if, by addressing belief before belonging, we're starting the conversation at the wrong place? Instead of sitting in collective bewilderment and frustration about how these people could believe these things, these crazies, what if we first looked under the hood and thought about what made them vulnerable to this information in the first place? What might they be getting out of this that they're not getting in their everyday lives? How much does it have to do with a different truth? Or how much does it have to do with the community that truth brings? We need to think about people's circumstances and reference points, to see them as fellow human beings who want to believe in something and want to belong, just like all of us do in this room. Because if we continue with our current approach of arguing on the level of belief, it's not going to get us anywhere. We're going to end up with more echo chambers, more disinformation, and more polarization. Instead, we can do the harder work of looking into what is fueling the need for an alternate truth. Not only would this lend us more empathy for those who think differently than us, but I really think this might be the only actually productive means of moving toward the shared reality that we all want to live in. Let's direct our energy toward the crisis of belonging, and then maybe we will understand the crisis of belief.
So this is where I came into this, and this is the reason why I wanted to do this episode. As I said before, my really only understanding of Birds Aren't Real was that it was just like this meme that was like a satire of conspiracy theories, and I maybe had seen something of this guy here and there, but ultimately I just kind of thought it was a meme that had just sort of self-replicated on the internet. And a year ago when this came out, I saw some videos of basically what was clearly like him teaming up with Taylor Lorenz to make these like kayfabe rivalry videos that were meant to be a part of some kind of thing he was doing. And then I watched this TED Talk. And this TED Talk that I saw was the reason why I wanted to do this whole episode, because everything that he says in the video just so thoroughly clicked with the way that I think about these things that it was just like incredibly validating to see him talking about these things that I talk about a lot and I don't really see a lot of other people talking about. And I don't tend to meet people who like agree with me that much. In fact, I've like literally gotten into like arguments with people. Listeners of the show have DM'd me and told me I'm wrong about this. And I've like gotten into discussions with him because he learned about this the hard way by like creating this thing and playing a character that was a conspiracy theorist that believed in like a crazy thing and getting real people coming up to him and just like showering him with like hate and disdain and like, you're a fucking idiot and all this stuff. And the thing he said earlier in the quote was absolutely spot on. This idea of like, you see it constantly on the internet, particularly arguments and comment sections and things like that. And, you know, you see people who are, you know, they have these beliefs or whatever. And then you have somebody being like, you're crazy. Like you are a fucking lunatic and, you know, hurling all this vitriol at them. It's like a self-indicting statement because it's like, if you genuinely believe that this person is schizophrenic or crazy or whatever, and this is how you're treating them, like that's kind of fucked up. Like if this person was genuinely schizophrenic, you would be sitting there yelling at them in their face and saying, fuck you, you're an idiot. That's an insane response. If someone you genuinely believe they were schizophrenic and your response was to yell at them, it's abusive. I learned this in a different way. I didn't learn it by becoming a fake conspiracy theorist and having this treatment hurled on me, but instead I learned this stuff whenever I sought out to do the QAnon series, because the QAnon series started out being a way different thing than what it ended up becoming. And I don't know if I've talked about this on the show that much because I died shortly after it came out. I didn't have time. Yeah. But the QAnon series started out as just, we're going to cover this thing and we're going to talk about how crazy it is. And we're going to debunk all of these conspiracy theories and just kind of point out how they don't make sense. And we're just going to look at these crazy people and just talk about what a horrible cancer on society this thing is. And then what ended up happening is I spent like a year researching and writing this thing. And I had been doing research prior to that, just out of fascination with it. But to actually write the thing and do the episode, it took about a year. I wanted to do the QAnon series since the beginning of Deep Cuts. And it took about a year to get it all the way through and written and done. And then we did it towards the end of 2020. We started the show in the beginning and we did the QAnon series at the end. or actually no, it was more like 2 years. Yeah. Cause QAnon was season 2. So yeah, it took like a year. So I wanted to do in the beginning, and then over time I kind of collected research, and then I spent a good chunk of that year researching and writing, and I learned a lot of stuff from that research phase. I read multiple books. I read a lot of stuff. I delved deep into the actual people that believe these things. And then I started interviewing people. I started interviewing journalists and people who were involved in the movement. And I started interviewing therapists, and I started interviewing people who like helped people get out of cults for a living, like mediators and cult deprogrammers and things like that. I interviewed all these people, and the series became a whole different thing because in that time, my mind was completely changed about the whole thing. And I was like, this isn't a story about like crazy people who are just fucking idiots and they believe dumb shit and it's bad for the world. This is a story about like really sad and alone and like lost people who have put their trust in the wrong system, and it's taken them down a dark path. But these people all just need help. They need somebody to help them. And this isn't about like, oh, fuck you idiots, you're all a bunch of morons. This is like, these people are sick. They need help. And we need to figure out a better way of handling this than saying, fuck you, you're a dumbass, and getting into stupid squabbles on internet comments threads and stuff. This TED Talk just exactly spoke to that thing that I learned over the course of making the QAnon series. And I still to this day firmly believe that this is the case. And, you know, there's a lot of factors in it. And, you know, a lot of it is like, obviously the QAnon stuff, it started out with like sort of like far right extremist people. But I think it's true of anybody. And you see it more and more because now there's all these, you know, now there's like liberal conspiracy theory bullshit, Blue Anon and all that stuff like that. It's bled over into like all facets of society. And I truly believe there are genuine problems in the world, and there's obviously a lot of fucked up shit happening right now and has been for years. And it's not that we're overreacting, but the way that the internet churns out misinformation and sensationalism makes it hard to separate the real issues and the real problems that we actually have to tackle from like us just getting lost in our own heads and getting consumed by paranoia and buying into narratives and buying into fear mongering. It's hard to separate out the two. And I genuinely believe that a big part of it is that everybody's just kind of alone and isolated, and people just don't have friends anymore, and they're left alone to just scroll through their phones and get spun up on all this bullshit that they're seeing. And there's no one there to be like, hey, let's go hang out. And yeah, there's problems, but like, maybe it's not as bad as that. And maybe that's not really a real thing. And maybe this is the more important thing we should be talking about. And a lot of people just don't have that. A lot of people just don't have fucking friends. The way that I learned that directly is, I think it was like early 2021, you know, pandemic had been happening. I hadn't seen anybody other than my family, my wife and my kids for like a solid year. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't talk to anybody. We didn't do anything. I mean, I was doing deep cuts. So I was talking, you know, with Dave every day, and I worked remotely. So I talked to my bosses and coworkers and stuff like that. But for the most part, I wasn't having like real communal interactions with friends. And I was never talking about these things. And I was getting spun up on these things. I was, you know, there was a lot of stuff I was freaking out about and thinking like, oh fuck, like this is scary. This is getting really bad. This is awful. They're trying to do this, they're trying to do that. I was getting in my head about a lot of these things. And then in early 2021, our friend Miles, he lives in Portland, and he visited. And so he was visiting, and he contacted me. He's like, hey, I'm going to be in LA. Let's hang out and let's get everybody together. And so my wife and kids were actually out of town, and they were going and actually visiting her family for the first time in like a year. And you guys came and spent the weekend at my house. It was you, it was Miles, our friend, and it was our friend Brandon. And we hung out the weekend. And, you know, Miles was visiting from Portland, but we really didn't go anywhere or do anything. We just kind of sat and talked the whole time. And it was like a extremely cathartic experience for me. It was the first time I had really sat and like hung out with friends and just talked about stuff in like a year. And when you guys left, I felt like there was like a load lifted off my shoulders. I felt like a new person. Like, I'm not joking. I felt it was like a transformative experience just to sit down with friends and talk about stuff and have people being like, oh yeah, like I'm really freaked out about this. And then being like, yeah, but like, you know, I don't know. I think it'll be fine. And yeah, that's a problem, but like, it's maybe not like that. And we just have to think about it like this. It was an insanely cathartic experience. I actually wrote a song about it, which ended up becoming part of Deep Cuts. It's a song within the Deep Cuts lore. And it was a song sung in a very similar context where we were kind of telling a storyline that was similar to what had happened. And I realized kind of from that moment on, like, people are just alone and they're just isolated and they're not having communal experiences and sitting down and talking about things with their friends. So everybody in the world is just getting fucking spun up in their head and getting paranoid and freaking out about things and seeing all this doom and gloom on the internet and it getting to them and, consuming them with fear. And there's nobody to talk to about it.
Yeah. I remember that weekend and having it be like very cathartic for me as well. Like again, it was like the first time I had seen you for a long time. I mean, since at least the pandemic started, Miles I hadn't seen in a long time. And just like seeing his TED Talk, the thing I was struck by is that it must be so terrifying to do something is a joke. Like you lifted a joke from Nick Kroll and it just became your job. And then have someone come up to you and be like, you're fucking crazy. And then to have that thought of like, well, maybe this is all true. And then being like, oh, fuck, I need to like do something about this because I know this is bullshit. And so the people who, as you said, like get into QAnon, who genuinely believe it, or maybe at the start they were like, they read some stuff about it and they're like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe that is true. And so they say something about it, maybe or online or maybe like to someone, and they're just like, what? That's fucking stupid. And no one wants to be stupid. So they just go, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it is real. And then they just kind of dig themselves further. And this is like a very low stakes example, but I posted a TikTok a while ago. Someone else, like another big creator, stated just like a movie trivia fact that was like blatantly false. And so I just made a TikTok being like, that's not true. Here's stuff showing like it didn't happen. And people just commenting into the comments and saying, well, what the fuck do you know? And it's just like, well, I didn't lie. I'm providing like evidence. I'm showing all these articles, but there just seem to be a lot of people who want to believe the reality they want to believe. Even if it's as low stakes as just like, oh yeah, I thought this was like a fun little movie trivia fact. And then someone comes along and be like, actually, it's not true. To react so violently and having that anonymity of the internet and being able to say like, you fucking idiot in a comment section, it shows like how alone everyone is, how wrapped up you can get in your phone. And I feel like as cliche as it may be, like just putting your phone down, just like seeing people.
Yeah. And an even more simple example of it is like, and I feel like to a certain degree, people all experience something like this, but sometimes you get like, sometimes I'll get into like an argument, like a disagreement or an argument with my wife. And, it could be something stupid. Like we're just talking about something and it's like, oh, this thing. And then, she disagrees with it, and we, might get into an argument about it. And, the argument continues on, and eventually, sometimes I catch myself where like I start to like defend my position, defend the argument I'm making, and I'm moving further and further trying to defend this thing. At a certain point, I'm realizing that I'm saying things that I don't actually fully believe or I don't feel that strongly about because I feel like I've been backed into a corner where I have to defend my position. I have to defend this thing that I'm saying. And so I'm like going out of my way to try and not let it go or not admit that I'm wrong or not like admit that maybe it's not as clear cut as I thought it was or whatever the thing is. And so I'm like, I'm making arguments that I don't actually agree with. I'm only making them because I feel like I'm backed into a corner and somebody is telling me you're wrong, you're wrong. And I think everybody does that. Everybody does that to a certain degree whenever they get into arguments. And then, sometimes you just have to take a step back and be like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, why am I doing this? What am I doing right now? Why am I going so far to defend this? I don't actually even care that much. That's a common experience that everybody has with just, human interaction. You have a friend or a sibling or a significant other, and you get into an argument about some stupid little thing, and then you end up doing that. And that's blown up to 1,000% when you're arguing with a stranger about something that you genuinely, deeply have this set of beliefs around. And, our boy Peter, he discovered that the hard way. He discovered that the natural human reaction to somebody being like, you're fucking wrong, you're an idiot, is for you to want to double down on the thing that you're saying. So much so that he actively does not believe the thing he's saying and it's a joke. And yet he still experienced that instinct to want to defend it and like dig his heels in and believe it more. Whenever somebody pointed at him and was like, fuck you, you're a fucking idiot. He had that galvanizing moment where he's like, and this is me who doesn't actually believe this shit and it's a joke. This is what we're doing to all these people every day, all the time. We're just like yelling at them and being like, fuck you, you're a fucking idiot, shut the fuck up. This isn't working. This isn't making the world better. It's literally just assuaging our egos, and that's it. That's where it ends. All these people that are walking up to him and yelling at his face, they don't realize that they look like fucking idiots because this is obviously a joke. They look like fools because they're yelling at somebody for something that's an obvious satirical bit. That it's not about that. It's not about helping this person. It's not about getting them to agree with you. It's like a moral superiority thing where you like feeling like you're better than somebody. And that's what we're all doing to each other all the time. That's what the internet has turned us into. And it's obviously not working.
Yeah. And just on a slight tangent, like, go hang out with your friends. I feel like there's a faux self-care thing going on the internet where like a lot of people will say like, you know, it's actually abusive for your friends to ask you for a ride to the airport. And it's like, I gave you a ride to the airport last year in Space Hell, and it was like a lot of fun. We just like drove down there, and it was like cool.
Yeah, and then you called the cops on me. This was rough.
Yeah, that's why you came back early.
I had to take some classes after that. But yeah, of course. I mean, to be fair, I didn't ask you. My wife did. I don't think I would have asked you. That's not my vibe. I usually don't ask people for favors like that. But obviously, it's fine. And if you asked me, I would do it immediately. Like, it wouldn't be an issue.
Or like even
sometimes
like,
maybe it's, I'm sure in certain situations it might be inconvenient or annoying because you're just like, oh fuck, I don't want to do that. It takes like 2 hours, but it's not abusive.
No, yeah,
it's insane.
But I think people try to find the excuses not to hang out with people in the interest of like self-care. There's like bed rotting is now a thing where you like, and I don't know, sometimes you need to just chill for the day, or if you're in a depressive episode, that's one thing. But like, you should ideally like try to find moments where like you can go out, ideally see a friend or see a family member, and just like not look at your phone.
Yeah, but the thing is like culture has been like fundamentally shifted to discourage that actively. Yeah. Like I'm not going to take credit for this, but something that another fellow TikToker, Jason Pargin, who's an author, he wrote for Cracked. So, you know, he was your boss for a little bit when you used to write for Cracked, and he ended up becoming an author, and he wrote the John Dies at the End series. It's a great book series. He also wrote the Zoe series. I love his books. I'm a huge fan, and, you know, we're TikTok mutuals.
He's my TikTok. He reposts my stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes he reposts my videos and likes them, which is nice, considering that I kind of grew up like as him as kind of like my version of a literary hero or whatever.
He's your David Sedaris.
Yes, he was my David Sedaris. But he said this thing multiple times, this idea that like the algorithms on social media are like designed to keep us locked into looking at our phones. So, you know, not only are they designed to be addictive and keep you scrolling, but they also are designed to like discourage you from putting your phone down or going and doing other things. And so part of that is like feeding you a bunch of fear-mongering content that makes you scared of going outside. And so you'll see these videos of like people fighting in public and people getting hit by cars and, you know, somebody like, you know, walking down the street and, you know, somebody running up to them and like fucking sucker punching them, or people getting into an argument where somebody's accusing somebody of something that they didn't do. And you see these videos and it just like makes you scared to go outside because you're like, everyone outside is fucking crazy. The world has gone mad and you don't want to leave. And so you just stay in your house and you stay on your phone and you just keep scrolling through the videos. And it's all part of like a plan where, you know, whether intentional or not, or just these algorithms being really good at figuring out how to keep you on them, they have curated a reality for you that makes you not want to go out and hang out with your friends and do stuff outside. And so it's like this galvanizing, it's like Pyrex glass, you know, the harder you push against it, the stronger it becomes, where it's like this galvanizing, you know, over and over again pressurized thing that's pushing you into your house and onto your couch and looking at your phone. And then there's like this feedback loop of more content that you're seeing that's making you even more scared to get up and go outside. And it's just like this sick cycle that we're all stuck in. And we need to like figure out how to break out of it somewhat in some way. Someone Peter used this newfound knowledge on was his own father. He recalled talking to his dad about corporate evil, where his initial instinct was to spout off a bunch of Bernie Sanders talking points. Instead, he pivoted to bring up the Bible and the book of Mark.
Bringing up the scripture and getting on his level changed his mind. It was about, how can I unkink the hose of this conversation and create a bridge in a common language?
Even though Peter has fully admitted that birds aren't real isn't an actual movement, it's still going strong. In October of 2022, nearly a year after Peter came out to the New York Times, a group of 2,000 protesters gathered at Washington Park in New York, holding up signs that said, "Pigeons are liars," and booing anytime a flock of birds flew overhead. It was the single biggest turnout to date, and Peter kept the mythology alive. In 2024, he, along with Connor Gatos, published the book Birds Aren't Real, the true story of mass avian murder and the largest surveillance campaign in U.S. history. Even though Peter's alright with breaking character nowadays, he still knows how to keep the bit going when he needs to. He's moved up from local TV news stations to nationally syndicated broadcasts. In 2023, he put out a documentary that aired on Fox Nation called Birds Are Fake, The Conspiracy, and appeared on Fox News to promote it.
Birds Are Fake, The Conspiracy is out now on Fox Nation, and Peter McIndoe,
Pete Hegseth?
information officer of
This goes all the way to the
Aren't
top.
Real. So, Peter, you're telling me you believe that there are no living birds?
I believe it. I know it, actually.
You know it?
I know it as proof, yes.
All birds?
Every bird in the U.S., I know.
Does that include chickens?
Is a chicken a bird?
A chicken's a bird.
A chicken's a bird.
So I just fed my chickens back home. They didn't seem to be robots.
Yeah, that's kind of how biotechnology works. The government's making biohybrids where there are birds and robots that the government's combining. Annie Jacobson's done some great work on this.
So you're saying they have human characteristics, the eyes, the wings?
Not human characteristics, they have bird characteristics. What the government did
That guy's in charge of our defense?
Every bird in the sky with a government surveillance drone replica that looks identical to a real bird, spies on us every day. So when you walk outside, I mean, there's probably 100 cameras in here. There's more cameras outside than there are.
So hold on, we can't win foreign wars and we can't run a DMV, but we can control every bird in the sky?
We can. I mean, and I appreciate you allowing me to share this information on here. A lot of the media won't let me talk about
Is this
stuff.
a shtick? I mean, do you really in your heart?
Why would it be a shtick?
Because
yeah, I mean, you
birds
report
everywhere.
You report on UFOs in this show, yes?
Well, I don't report on them.
UFOs are, I mean, I respect what you guys talk about on here. You're letting bird robots on the show. You're letting UFOs in this show.
So do you think I could see the government using some birds maybe as drones to disguise them, but you're saying all birds, the pigeons here in New York City?
Every bird, in every pigeon here in New York City. And I mean, it's really an epidemic. It's a birdemic.
But this is a real theory. There are real people out there.
Yes, it's a real theory. It's been going on since the 80s. It's on the media. You can find it. It's just like really everything else out there. Truth is subjective. There's different proof for different things. And if you do your own research, look into it, you might find that out.
There you go. Go to Fox Nation, birds.
First of all, for the listener, the person interviewing him is Pete Hegseth, the current head of our Department of Defense.
I wrote this episode a while back when he wasn't that.
Yeah.
And then, so that was a jump scare for me. It just didn't register. I don't watch Fox News. So I was just like, oh, it's just some guy. And that's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
It's him.
But it's funny because Peter is very obviously like kind of trolling or poking fun at the way that Fox News just like gives equal value to all perspectives, and they just invite people on to just spout crazy conspiracy nonsense and like take it seriously. And he's clearly jabbing at that, and he just doesn't get it. He's not catching on to the fact that he's like, yeah, I really respect what you guys do here. You let people on, you talk about UFOs and things like that, and I like how you let people, you don't censor people. He's obviously poking fun at the fact that they just like exercise zero critical analysis of anything that they allow to be said on the network,
and doesn't matter.
He's just not getting it at all.
My favorite or least favorite line is when Hegseth is like, "Listen, I could see some birds being drones. Like, he's willing to engage with it and be like, you know what, maybe some birds.
Well,
not all birds,
the thing is, like, he's weaponizing the way that platforms like Fox News and Newsmax and some of these like fairly extremist platforms, he's weaponizing the way that they constantly take the contrarian position on everything. It's like, if it is the opposite of what like the mainstream media is saying, it is therefore true. And he's weaponizing that and pushing it to its limit, where it's like, this is what you do all the time. I'm telling you, birds aren't real, and it's what the government doesn't want you to know. So based on your own rules that you've created for your reality, you should take this uncritically and just believe what I'm saying. He's like pushing it to its extreme. He's like, how far are you willing to let this like fake, like, I believe in anything as long as it's like the opposite of what Democrats are saying thing that you do every day? How far does that go? Where's the line that you have?
Just want to say real quick that by my apartment, there's a billboard that used to have an ad for the Epoch Times. And there was whatever their slogan is, like, the only place for the truth. And then someone just drew like a giant dick next to like the guy's, whoever the guy is, I don't know, next to his mouth. And then it was gone the next day. They just took the entire billboard down.
Nice. Was it the guy with the glasses?
Yeah, I don't know who he is. But.
Yeah, the Epoch Times is obviously, we talked about it on a previous episode, the Falun Gong or Xinyan episode, but the Falun Gong is a Chinese cult that was like kicked out of China, and they have like this huge grudge against the Chinese Communist Party. And so they created a newspaper called the Epoch Times that's basically dedicated to just like championing American conservative neoliberalism and capitalism and talking about how terrible communism is. And, you know, in 2020, they became like really big into Trump. And then Xinyan is like a musical that they do that's like,
I know Xinyan.
Yeah, it's like
I've seen those billboards too.
Yeah, Xinyan is like,
looked into that.
The Falun Gong also run that, and it's just like a propaganda arm. It's a whole musical about how China used to be so much better before the CCP came in, which may be true, but they're also just a weird cult. It was always one of those papers that was like up in the front of the cash register, along with like the Daily Examiner or whatever. It was always kind of regarded as like a conspiracy theory rag. And then in 2020, they tried to rebrand themselves by getting a bunch of white guys to be the face of it. So it's like that guy with the glasses, kind of dressed like a hipster in a suit or whatever, a couple other white guys. And they tried to like completely rebrand the company as like a white male conservative news outlet. So those guys started being the face of it. And they did this whole advertising campaign. And they also changed the pronunciation of the thing from Epoch Times to Epic Times. They actually changed the way that they said the name of the company.
Isn't that a YouTube channel? Epic Times? Epic Meal Times. That's what I'm
saying.
Yeah.
No, but yes, Epic Meal Time. But also, yeah, they call it, they changed it to be called the Epic Times. I guess to disassociate from its previous reputation as basically like a, you know, National Examiner type thing. And that's where that billboard came from, is from that big advertising campaign they did in 2020.
I'm not condoning it, but if you draw a dick on the billboard, they will take it down.
That's all you got to do.
Just saying.
That's the cheat code. If you see an Epic or Epoch Times billboard, just draw a dick on it. Try it with other things too. Who knows when it will work. But Birds Aren't Real isn't Peter's only venture these days. Peter has collaborated with Adam Faze, the studio chief for Faze World, a production studio crafting shows for platforms like TikTok and YouTube. The pair are working on a political show called 50 Stars that seeks to harness younger voices and combat misinformation. Following the 2024 election, a big talking point on the left was, who can be the left's Joe Rogan? That's exactly what 50 Stars wants to find, according to Peter.
The right has a very strong engine ecosystem that is communicating with Gen Z, from the Daily Wire to MAGA YouTubers, the NELK boys, to the Joe Roganverse, to the Jordan Petersons and their Andrew Tates. The left doesn't have anything comparable.
More than anything, the goal of 50 Stars is to serve as an organizing tool, which Peter already has seen some success with. Back in 2023, Peter worked with Brooklyn City Council member Chi Osei, hope that's pronounced right, in an attempt to reduce proposed rent increases in the district. Peter called upon those who had signed up for a newsletter to show up at a rent guidelines board meeting, the kind of boring bureaucratic event most people ignore and don't participate in, even though these meetings have an immediate impact on their communities. However, he had roughly 1,000 people show up to voice their outrage, with a line wrapping around the block. The board had originally proposed raising rents as much as 16%. Thanks to the turnout announcing their displeasure at such an idea, rents were only raised by 3%. This is going back to what I was talking about before of like how you can weaponize something like this for good. And I think actually the really great thing about something like Birds Aren't Real, as I said before, is how unspecific it is, because, movements are built constantly. Maybe a little less so today, because as we talked about before, everyone's just in their rooms on TikTok, but coalitions and movements and organized groups of people are created constantly, and they always tend to be about a specific thing. So you have like Occupy Wall Street, the anti-Vietnam War movement of the 1970s, and these coalitions, for the most part, because they're so specific, they sort of have a goal, and whenever they don't accomplish the goal, the movement is dead. Occupy Wall Street was this thing that happened.
That ended real quick. And
it failed and didn't accomplish what it wanted to accomplish. And then this movement of thousands upon thousands of organized people just dissolved. It was just gone. The benefit of this is that it's not a specific coalition organized around a specific goal. It's a container, like as I said before, of a group of like-minded people who can be mobilized against any number of issues. To a certain degree, we have a newer movement, a newer progressive movement in the wake of the election and, the Trump getting reelected. There's the new progressive movement that's being led by Bernie Sanders and AOC, and they're doing this national speaking tour. And that's great. But I actually think something like this has a little bit of a benefit over that, because they're trying to organize and mobilize people around the idea of like striking down a lot of these horrible draconian laws and actions being done by the current presidential administration. And hopefully that works. But if it doesn't, then once again, they failed and the movement dies. Something like this, in theory, can never die, because it's built off of like a kernel of an idea, which is apolitical, and it's more about creating a community, and those people can be utilized indefinitely for anything.
Yeah, it's about doing little funny things. And I think it is great, like Bernie and AOC like going and doing these like big events. But then he just like took these people to like a town board meeting, which are actually like very important to attend. And a lot of the times if they're like doing something in your immediate neighborhood, if they're building something, maybe something you don't want in your neighborhood, or they're proposing some kind of tax, or in this case a rent increase, like they have to have the meeting. Like, and so like to take that and be like, hey, here's a thing normally no one gives a shit about.
Yeah, people will go because it's boring.
It's boring. It is boring.
But it's not. But it's not boring whenever you're going to do like a weird performance art conspiracy theory bird thing.
If you go to do a bit, then suddenly it becomes very fun, and you have people. I guess the most immediate example is like those Parks and Rec scenes where like they have the board meetings and then everyone is just insane and like yelling out whatever nonsense they want to. But if you can like, instead of having like the Pawnee people yelling things that don't matter, if you actually go and voice what, it's like, hey, you might pay less in rent next year. And I think that is like worth utilize, having the two extremes, having Bernie and AOC go to like the big convention centers, but then having this guy like kind of honing in on the smaller events that like where they can make a most immediate difference in people's communities. I think we need both.
Yeah, for sure.
We need everything.
And Peter has a new social satirical movement to lay claim to. Some news outlets were baffled when Enron, the energy company found to have engaged in massive fraud in 2001, seemingly back in December of 2024. However, publicly available documents show that the Enron trademark was purchased for $275 in 2020 by an Arkansas-based LLC called The College Group. The company's co-founder is Connor Gatos, and along with Peter McIndoe, the two now have control over Enron.com, which is mostly filled with corporate platitude and an online shop to buy Enron-branded swag. And in 2025, Enron unveiled its newest product, the Enron Egg, touting it as a mini nuclear reactor for the home, able to power any residential house for 10 continuous years. The Egg, whatever it ends up actually being, currently isn't available for purchase, but you can pre-order by signing up for Enron's newsletter. And if you look carefully through the new website, they lay out how this whole endeavor is meant for performance art and protected under parody. What's the end game for the Enron bid, if there even is one? That remains to be seen, as things are still rolling out on that front. But Birds Aren't Real remains a rallying cry for those tired of being bombarded with falsities online, and finding ways to combat misinformation online is only going to become more critical in the years ahead. Peter McIndoe has said that Birds Aren't Real isn't so much illuminating the divide between the left and right, but between older generations and newer ones. While Gen Z can immediately clock that Birds Aren't Real is satire, older generations tend to be the ones who get angry at Peter and his supporters. Even then, Gen Z isn't immune to right-wing propaganda. Young men between the ages of 18 and 29 overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump in the 2024 election, with 56% voting for him. In contrast, 40% of women 18 to 29 voted for Trump, but even that's a massive gain compared to 33% of women in that age demographic voting for him in 2020. So how does the left gain back younger voters who feel disaffected? Young men who feel disaffected by any law that improves women's lives, even just marginally, who feel like victims of the so-called loneliness epidemic. There aren't easy answers to this, but Peter's insights from forming a fake conspiracy theory might prove a useful place to start. Just talking to people, talking to them as though they're real human beings rather than dumbasses too far gone to help. Birds Aren't Real could have remained a funny internet meme, but Peter took it a step further. Now he's spreading the word of how to combat disinformation with a rival network in place to combat Joe Rogan, frequently platforming conspiracy theorists on his podcast. It might be too early to say that Peter McIndoe's Birds Aren't Real movement will save us from the spread of conspiracies online, something that probably isn't going away anytime soon. But he's providing the tools to fight it through the veneer of satire, like hiding medication in a piece of cheese. Dunking on some conspiracy theorists on Twitter likely isn't going to do much good in the long run, but creating a platform for young people to organize and see for themselves how silly these movements can be, well, maybe that's the thing that will save us. Yo, real quick, this is Andrew from the future, and I just got to jump in real quick before we finish out the episode to say that we bunged up. This Birds Aren't Real episode was written in, I think, January, and it was going to be the first episode that we came out with in February when we returned, Dave and me. But some stuff happened, and Dave had to take a hiatus, and we didn't end up coming back until May, and we're doing this guest host thing. And so, we came out with this episode now, and obviously it's recorded with my friend Mike instead of Dave. But because of this issue where this was supposed to come out in February, and then we didn't end up doing it, and things have been a little bit chaotic behind the scenes since then, full transparency, we recorded the episode, but made the fatal flaw of not checking back and seeing if there had been any updates about this story before recording the episode, and was only alerted after the fact by our editor, Louis Poggie. Shout out to what do we call you? The Big Poj? Yeah, the Big Poj, for bringing this to my attention, that there actually was more development in this story that happened in March, literally right after we were supposed to have put the episode out. And it's stuff that it would have been cool to sit and talk with Mike about, but unfortunately that's not how it shook out. But I just wanted to come in and at least kind of cover it and just make sure that we didn't just leave something out and people listen to the episode and they're like, what the fuck, they didn't even talk about this new thing. So basically what's happened is the Enron company that McIndoe started in March launched a crypto coin called Enron coin. And there's not a whole lot to it in terms of the details of it. Well, that's not true. There's just not, the story isn't that deep, but there is a lot to it. They launched this crypto coin, and it came out, and there was actually a bunch of hype around it. It was a real crypto coin. It wasn't like a joke, like Hilsmer's cryptocurrency. And at one point, it had a $700 million market cap. This crypto coin launched, and it was incredibly successful in its opening, couple of days of launch. And then a bunch of people bought it, and then the project crashed and went down to $130 million market cap. Which, if you don't know about this kind of stuff, that's not good. And basically a lot of people ended up feeling scammed. They lost, they were tricked by Enron and they lost a bunch of money. And that's basically all that's happened. There's really nothing about this. Like McIndoe or Enron haven't come out and like said anything more about this. This just happened, and nothing's really been said or addressed about it. A lot of people are upset about it because, it was essentially a rug pull, which is basically in the world of cryptocurrency, or NFTs or whatever. It's like a big scam that, rips off money from people. So people are really upset about it. They feel scammed. People like CoffeeZilla, who's a guy who basically has a YouTube channel where he kind of calls out predatory and scammy crypto and NFT projects. He made a video talking about how it was a scam. So people are upset about it. And, once again, it's something that would have been great to be able to sit and talk about with Mike, because there's tons to unpack about it. But I won't sit here and just rant by myself about it. So unfortunately, we can't really get into it. But the interesting thing about it real quick is just that, like, in the spirit of Birds Aren't Real, this Enron thing is obviously supposed to be some kind of like performance art satire thing. And it seemed like it was building up to some kind of satirical, big reveal. And then they did this crypto coin, which I guess is supposed to be satire of like scammy cryptocurrency, but also they really actually did scam people, and there was actual money involved, and they actually did pull a real rug pull on people. So there's a lot of questions and things to unpack about it, of like, what does that mean? And it honestly kind of recontextualizes a lot of the discussion we had, because, you just sat and listened for 2 hours of us talking about like, yeah, this is really cool and interesting, and he can utilize this platform for good. And, he has this coalition of people who can, make real change in the world. Then at the end of it, he just like scams a bunch of people out of money like that. Unless there's some big thing happening, because once again, there really hasn't been any information that's come out since then. So we haven't seen there's been no conclusions to this, even though it happened back in March. Unless there's some big reveal of like, he comes out and gives the money back to everybody, and then like reveals that he's donating the rest of the profit to some charity. I don't even know. But unless something like that happens, it's just really interesting and kind of shady and concerning that he just genuinely scammed a bunch of people out of money, and didn't really seem to do anything with that. It just kind of went nowhere. It was just like they launched a coin, rug pulled, ripped a bunch of people off, and then just went radio silent. So yeah, like I said, it's a lot to talk about, and I wish we could have, but unfortunately we missed out on this. We didn't do our due diligence. We didn't double check before we recorded. So apologies, but I just wanted to jump in and at least cover it and say that like, we do know about this. We just fucked up. So back to the end of the show. Well, Mike, this is usually the time where we kind of give our final thoughts on everything we've discussed in the episode, overarching themes. So what are your final thoughts on Peter McIndoe and his grand conspiracy?
Like I said, I just kind of saw this as a meme for many years, and then through writing this episode realized how much had it evolved, what else Peter McIndoe is doing, what Peter McIndoing.
Oh yeah.
There we go. We needed to do it. But it really does feel like he's laying, and I don't know how much impact. I would be so curious actually if there was someone who, since Birds Aren't Real was this internet thing, like you could find it on Reddit, if there was someone who believed in like actual conspiracies, who like saw Birds Aren't Real and was just like, what's this stupid bullshit, and was just like, oh, is that what I think? And like, if it was able to pierce that veil a little bit. But ultimately, I think the fact that what Birds Aren't Real to a large extent was establishing these chapters in different cities across the country where people actually gathered, like actually met up in person in parks and in front of buildings, and ideally like they talked with one another. And again, I'd be so interested to learn if anyone like made friends like just through showing up at the same Birds Aren't Real events and like having that platform, because that is something like I don't know if like right-wing influencers really have, like if they have meetups, maybe they do, I'm just not privy to it. But it's mostly does seem to be like influencers like listen to my podcast, watch my YouTube channel about, how to be a man in 2025. But like the fact that he created something that caused people to get out of their homes, show up to something, just have fun, and do a bit, I think that kind of shows like it's the right path to be on, and hopefully it continues. I don't know what he's doing with the Enron thing, but I hope Birds Aren't Real kind of keeps going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a secret weapon, and honestly, I just really wish it was being utilized more. Like, it's funny because all these things I'm saying about Peter McIndoe and Birds Aren't Real, I'm almost kind of overselling it because in theory, I think it was this really genius thing to do, and I see the grand potential of it and all these things that we've talked about how you can utilize it and weaponize it and create communities and mobilize people, you know, to do community action and things like that. But in reality, you don't really see it being used that much. Like, there's just been a couple of things. It almost kind of, in a way, feels like it's like he's trying to do that, but he hasn't quite gotten critical mass with it. And maybe it's just kind of died down a little bit. And maybe he didn't quite accomplish the thing that he wanted to do with it. And now he's doing this Enron thing. And he's kind of moving on to this next project because the Birds Aren't Real thing didn't quite pan out. So as much as I think like there's something really magical here, and I kind of find this thing that we're talking about to be this secret weapon that could be really utilized to change things in a massive way, I really wish I was seeing more of it being done. And it just doesn't seem, it's almost frustrating where it's like, I saw the Enron thing in December and it's like, what's going on with that? Where's that at? What are you doing with that thing? Has that not happened yet? Like, come on, guys. Shit's getting bad out here. Do some shit.
Yeah. And especially like with Birds Aren't Real kicking off at the start of the first Trump term, and now he's back, and it's like, kind of feels like it did die down a little bit. It almost feels like, you know how you see a tweet that like just has like blanket misinformation, but it blows up, it goes viral, like 50 million people see it, and then they like post like they like subtweet it, or like they post a follow-up video or something being like, hey, so that actually wasn't true, but that one gets like 50,000 views.
Yeah.
And like no one really cares about the follow-up. Like it feels like everyone was super into Birds Aren't Real as a meme, and it's like, oh, it's this funny joke. And now he's like, no, let's take it further. Here are the tools we can kind of use. And people are just like, I liked it when it was like funny.
I just liked it whenever you could like buy a hat and people would be like, what do you believe? You're an interesting person. You believe some kooky stuff.
I liked it as a conversation starter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's grand potential for it, and I think that something like this, if not Birds Aren't Real, then something like this is a template for something that could be really effective. It frustrates me a little bit that it doesn't seem like there's actually any real movement on anything like that. And yeah, I would love to see somebody come out with something like this in a much larger scale, and I'm just not seeing that happening, and it's a little disheartening, and I kind of feel like, you know, the clock is running out a little bit on, you know, somebody to really come. I don't necessarily think it's like the Joe Rogan of the left or whatever. Like, I don't think we're going to get some magical podcaster that's going to save us. Like, the thing about this whole thing is like the manosphere and far right circles, like they're just better at doing community than we are for whatever reason. They're just better at it. And they've been working on it for years and years. Like basically, since Obama became president, people were like, wait a minute, we let a black guy become president? We need a plan. And then they've just been doing like a fucking Ocean's 11 style plan for like a decade. And we're not doing that. And it's concerning. And you know, part of me wishes there's some kind of magical cavalry of somebody like this that comes out of nowhere and it's like, you know, does some crazy thing that changes the tides. But unfortunately, I'm not necessarily seeing that. So I really think that the Birds Aren't Real thing is a fascinating concept and there's some real potential there. But if anything, at the end of the day, it kind of sticks out to me as like wasted potential.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see. I don't know. Yeah. If the Enron pans out to be literally anything, or if he kind of is just using it for merch opportunities and is just like, well, I make, you know, money. I made some money doing Birds Aren't Real, and now we can do. I also didn't know, like, we could have bought Enron.com for like $300.
Yeah.
Like,
honestly, it kind of inspired me to go looking for like any just like stray trademarks that are just up for grabs.
Yeah, go check out Joanne Fabrics in like a year. See if that domain's available.
We're gonna relaunch Joanne's as like an S&M club.
Oh yeah, nothing but threads.
See, that's why I have you here. And on that note, I'm Andrew Price.
And I'm Mike Bedard.
That's the show. If you want to follow us, you can go on Facebook and search Deep Cuts Podcast. You can join our Facebook group, Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. You can join our Discord server, bit.ly.com/deepcutsdiscord. You can follow us on Instagram at deepcutspod. You can follow us on TikTok at Mystery Treehouse. You can go to our shop, deepcutspod.com, and get hats and shirts and all kinds of stuff with Deep Cuts graphics on it. You can follow me on TikTok at Treehouse Detective, and
you can follow me on TikTok at Cinema Singularity.
Deep Cuts is a production by Boy Genius Media. If you'd like to find this show and others like it, please visit boygeniusmedia.com or deepcutspod.com.
If you want to join in on post-episode discussions, please join the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. Finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional video content.
The incidental music for this episode was created by D. Catalano, whose music can be found at wekeepoddhours.bandcamp.com. This episode of Deep Cuts was written by Mike Bedard. The episode was edited by Louis Poggie. If you'd be interested in writing for Deep Cuts, email andrew@boygeniusmedia.com.